Hey there, fellow resistors from around the globe. Thanks so much for joining us again on the Meidas Canada network. Today we're going to talk about something that may not have gotten a lot of attention. Well, I mean, how can almost anything get attention with this constant stream of chaos and rage baiting that's coming out from the far right? But that is part of the fascist playbook. Steve Bannon said it. He said it to flood the zone with shit so people can't keep up on what's happening. Meanwhile, there's a very clear playbook at work, and it's being worked very methodically. That's what we do on this show, is we show you how the playbook is in operation so you can figure out how they're trying to screw us over. So this episode is going to be called the 3 Fs. Farmageddon, we're going to talk about, explain that to you. We're going to talk about fascism. Yes, fascism, which is one of the underpinnings of the far-right strategy, and the effed up attitude of Donald Trump in his abuse of his allies, democracy, and his willingness to use oodles of American taxpayers' money to help out far-right causes in other countries, all while saying America's getting ripped off. But before we get to that, let's just do some updates of the great messages and swag we've been receiving. Now, check out this. This is a great art piece sent to us from John Moore from Maynooth, Ireland. I think he's more than fair to Donald Trump by putting him in the line of evolution somewhere behind Homo sapiens, but probably ahead of Zinjanthropus or Homo erectus. I think that's way too fair. I mean, certainly we think the Neanderthals, what we're learning about them is that they were a lot nicer and fair and more egalitarian than how they've been written in the books, and Donald Trump probably wouldn't be welcomed by them either. This one's from Sherry Friday. As a Canadian, I always thought of the USA as our rude, gun-toting cousins, yet they were family. Now I don't want to be associated with MAGA America ever again. Trust is earned, and when it's broken, you rarely get it back. From B. Park on the piece we did on the huge connections of dirty Russian money to Donald Trump. Hey, Charlie and Meidas Canada, thank you for educating this American in your Sunday video, going over the thorough history of Russian interference in past U.S. elections and using Trump as their tool and helping him into power along with other players. The corporate media down here have never explained it right, and this is the first time hearing the unbiased story from you. I quit the main media here 25 years ago, only to get my news from you and other alternative sources. Stay strong and vigilant, my friends in Canada. Don't let Maple MAGA infect your government here, as in the U.S. It's going to be a long, hard fight to remove this cancer from our government and have a civil society once again. Elbows up from one of your Texas supporters. Thanks. And this one's great. This is from Maeve in Pictou, Nova Scotia. She says, the vigil for Gaza in our little community of Pictou is growing. This past Saturday was the biggest yet, with over 40 people. It's incredible. I think we have a photo here of the vigils. We continue to gather every Saturday with flags, signs, adults, children, and the elderly alike, babies too, and chants. Last week, Barbara, my mom, and I brought the organic watermelons with us to share from a wonderful small farm. Our Syrian friends bring water and have reached out to the Muslim community at large, who are starting to come out too. Thanks for that, Maeve. You know, we've done a lot of work here on the Grandmothers Against Genocide, and if you're doing local efforts to promote resistance, whether it's against the genocide, whether it's Tesla takedowns, whether it's against King's protests, send us and tell us what you're doing, because people need to hear that other people are active too. This is from DIY2K. The more I learn about you, the more I like you, sir. You dropped out to play in a punk band? Yes, I did. My kind of people. It's funny how, as a reckless scallywag, I was politically charged in such a rudimentary way through civil disobedience and music, but being so fortunate to live where I do, haven't faced as many struggles that required me to become so aware and present. Knowing the systems we subscribe to have inherent flaws, but not really sure how to make any difference. As I mature, I find myself calling back to a lot of those fundamental messages and really coming to understand the deeper ties, and how even just as one individual, our voices can have an impact. And in that growing up, I have become a much more calculated and formidable person in the face of oppression. We've been training for this since we were kids. and probably never thought it would actually come to this. I thank you for encouraging more voices the way you do. You're a very important and powerful figure in this battle, and I commend you. Elbows up. Keep on rocking, Charlie. Love from Vancouver. Well, to my punk rock family, I really appreciate that because, these were the lessons we learned when we were young, and we just never thought we'd actually have to use it. But if ever there was a time for DIY, do-it-yourself, for resistance, it's now. So thank you to my punk rock friends in Vancouver. Okay, so let's get to today's show. We're going to talk about Farmageddon. We're going to talk about fascism and the effed up betrayal of Trump, of democracy and his base. I was just in Saskatchewan last week. Saskatchewan, of course, the breadbasket of Canada. I was watching the farmers taking the hay off their fields. This is going to be a very good year for crops in Canada. Certainly in Western Canada, other than the canola battle that we're fighting with the Chinese, it felt very positive. Crossing through southern Ontario over the last weeks, seeing the incredible crops coming up from corn, this is a good year. And yet, in the United States, they're talking about the collapse of the farm economy. We're talking about unprecedented losses in terms of all the major agricultural products. They're talking about farm families going under. They're talking about rural communities being hard hit. The term that they're using is Farmageddon. So why is that? Well, it has a number of factors, and they all go back to Donald Trump. So number one, he promised to get rid of all the migrants. Well, so suddenly there were no people to pick the fruit in California, New Mexico, other areas. They were suddenly had fields, no one to work them. Pesticides is another one. All the MAGA politicians who were going to go after all those woke regulations and cut red tape. You hear the same BS here from MAGA, Maple, Pierre Poilievre, the Danielle Smiths. We're going to cut red tape. We're going to cut red tape. Yeah, so they cut all the red tape and they cut the standards on pesticides. And then they thought they could sell this stuff in international markets, and suddenly there were huge container shipments of produce that just sat at the ports where their former markets were saying, nah, we're not buying your stuff, send it back. We're going to talk a bit about how Canada and Mexico are filling the gap, but if you notice that Canada's quietly been reaching out to all the markets where the United States used to be dominant, and one thing we can say is we've got traceability standards. We're going to sell you a good, clean product, and it's going to make people want to buy it. So that's one of the other ones. Then, of course, there's a tariff chaos that Trump has caused. For a farmer, your margin inputs are really small. In order to make it go of it, you have to know what your costs are going to be, and Donald Trump has created absolute chaos. So, for example, in the western United States, along the prairie provinces, they're heavily dependent, whether it's Canadian potash or trade back and forth across the border. Any interruption in terms of that causes major problems. But the biggest damage of all is the markets have simply disappeared. When Donald Trump starts insulting countries and threatening them and throwing all kinds of tariffs, countries say, okay, we just won't buy your product. Look at Canada. The complete collapse of the American spirits and wine industry, where their major market was Canada. And we just said, no, we're not buying your stuff anymore. Well, that has real life impacts on farm families, on communities, on the industries that were dependent on the Canadian markets. Same in tomatoes, same in corn. So what you're seeing now is that the Americans have simply lost their markets. The idea that it's going to come back is very questionable, because once markets move on, they move on. If you go to your local grocery store here in Canada, you will be really struck by how much produce is coming in now from Mexico. That used to be all dominated by the United States. Same with corn. Corn, which we used to rely on from Iowa and other states, Canadians just aren't buying it. That market has shifted. And it's also shifting in Europe in a significant manner. And once again, Canada is now selling Canadian corn into markets like Spain, England, Ireland, places we never touched before because it was dominated by the U.S. So thanks a lot, Donald Trump. This is what happens. This is what you do to your base. You piss markets off, those markets disappear, your farmers suffer. The biggest
area that they got hammered in was on April Fool's Day, when Donald Trump promised Liberation Day, and he promised a big, beautiful 145% tariff on China. How did the Chinese respond? Well, they just decided not to buy any more soybeans from the United States. Overnight, a $13 billion market just evaporated. So the American farm communities have been scrambling to deal with their bins full of soybeans that they can't sell. So now this brings us from Farmageddon to the second F. Because who steps up in the middle of this? Well, the Argentinian leader, Javier Mileiu, changed the export taxes on Argentinian soybeans and managed to secure the Chinese market this year, completely pulling the rug out from the United States, leaving the American farmers absolutely stuck. Now, what did Trump do in response? He offered a $20 billion bailout to keep the Argentinian president's government afloat. What's going on here? You know, Trump's going on about all these other countries that are ripping off America and screwing America over, and he's going to stand up. And here's Argentina that has just absolutely pulled the rug out from American farmers who are now scrambling for bailouts. And Donald Trump's going to give them $20 billion. Well, Javier Mileiu is a far-right extremist. Here's a guy who collapsed the Argentinian economy selling crypto memes to the tune of $4.4 billion in losses. This guy has been pushing further and further far-right ideologies in Argentina, and Donald Trump is backing him up. You know, I think it's really important for us to remember the context of the far-right takeover in Latin America in the 1970s. Argentina was a brutal dictatorship. Argentina has come out of that and become a democracy. And yet we see Donald Trump pushing far-right parties, just as we see they pushed the ADF in Germany, just as we see Vance interfering with elections in Romania, just as we see them beating the drums and driving the rage hate in the UK. This is about the ideology of promoting fascism over promoting the interests of their own farmers, over the interests of their democratic allies. That's where we're going with the far-right extremists. Now, I compare the treatment that Trump has given the extremist government in Argentina and the big bailout of money with the attack he made on President Petro from Colombia. Colombia is a country that is working really hard to improve life for its people. But President Petro gave a powerful, powerful speech at the United Nations. The United Nations, which is based in New York, I think we're going to start a campaign to say we got to move the United Nations out of New York. How about we move it to Ottawa? Okay, I know Ottawa is the town that fun forgot, but at least we're a democratic country, and we don't have the President of the United States threatening to go after political leaders of countries who speak up. As President Petro did while in New York. President Petro talked about, are we returning to a new Stone Age? He talked about the extrajudicial killings by the United States of these boats off the coast that of Latin America that Trump claims were cartels. There's no evidence of that. He talks about the horrific violence in Gaza. President Petro, let's just watch a little bit. We're not going to watch the whole speech, but you get a sense of a man who's speaking at an important moment. And what does Trump do? Trump wants him kicked out of the country.
The horrific situation in Palestine did not lead me to think that almost the same thing could happen in the Colombian Caribbean area, where unarmed young people are being shot at with missiles in the open seas. And now we are in a different situation. Perhaps it's more global, a kind of Stone Age that has descended on all of humankind. Missiles against 17 unarmed young people in the Caribbean Sea, some of them Colombians. The persecution, imprisonment, and expulsion of millions of migrants, missiles that have killed some 70,000 people in Gaza, the lack of action on the climate crisis. All this is linked, and all this has the same cause. Migration is simply an excuse so that a rich society, rich, white, and racist, believes itself to be the superior race and is not realizing that its leaders are leading it to the abyss, to its own distinction, together with the rest of humanity. They said that the missiles in the Caribbean were used to stop drug trafficking. That is a lie. Stated here in this very rostrum. In 2023 and 2024 were years when the largest amount of cocaine was seized, and over 700 drug traffickers were extradited to the United States in Europe. I extradited them, and my government confiscated the cocaine, and we didn't shoot a single missile, nor did we kill any youths. The years where I was able to prove that it's more effective to substitute coca crops than eradicate them, than forced eradication using poison, and forcing peasants to use it. The violent war against drugs was a failure, and I replaced it with an effective anti-trafficking policy, not based on a mix-up between an inert substance, that is drugs, with people who actually use it and practice it. But what was necessary is to destroy dialogue and to shoot missiles. Was it really necessary on unarmed, poor young people in the Caribbean? The anti-drug policy is not meant to stop cocaine that is coming to the United States. The anti-drug policy is to dominate the peoples of the South as a whole. You shouldn't look at the drugs, you should look at who has the power and who dominates. This is why I speak to you as a decertified president. I've been decertified by President Trump, without him having any right to do this, a human right or divine right or any sensible reason. They want to force by violence tens of thousands of peasants to do what the U.S. government wants to do, which are influenced by mafia groups in Colombia. Thousands of peasants are massacred in Colombia by politicians who were senators, who were presidents, who were ministers, that were bribed and on the payroll of the drug mafia. And at the same time, they were allies of the extreme right based in Florida of the United States, and now allies of the Trump administration. They've been allied for decades with drug lords, cocaine drug lords in Colombia. They were allies, and so they led this anti-drug policy from Washington. I don't know if Trump even knows that his foreign policy towards Colombia, Venezuela, and towards the Caribbean is based on advice from Colombians who are allies of the cocaine mafia. I myself denounced these politicians, including the paramilitaries, drug traffickers, naming them by their names in the Congress of Colombia when I was senator, and many times they wanted to kill me because of that. And they did not want me to become president. They wanted me to shut up. And now they don't want another progressive government to be reelected. That is why I've been personally decertified, and they have spread calumny against Colombia. Colombia has confiscated the highest amount of cocaine in the history of the country under my government, and I've been decertified.
So we have President Petro being attacked. We have Trump could be working better with President Sheinbaum, whose government has moved 8 million people out of poverty. You know, my work at the Pan American Congress this year and last year, meeting the incredible
leaders in, Ecuador and Brazil, in Colombia, Mexico, the other Latin American countries who are trying to build a better coalition to withstand all the threats that are coming. But the threat is Donald Trump. And so Canada, another opportunity to step in. I know that the Prime Minister is working with President Sheinbaum in Mexico, but we need to be working with Colombia. We need to be working with allies, democratic allies, and shoring those governments up as Donald Trump is trying to tear them down. So we've gone from Farmageddon to fascism, and now to the total effed up betrayal of Trump. Trump has undermined the United Nations. He's making a mockery of it by threatening leaders who come there. He's undermining our allies around the world continually. I know he said that he supports Ukraine over Russia now. I don't believe him. I have seen no efforts by Trump to actually hold Putin to account, as Putin is increasing the volatility of the situation in Europe with flyovers. I mean, they were scrambling jets in Alaska the other day, for crying out loud. What did Trump have to say about that? Trump's focus is supporting the far right. That's why he's locking himself in with the leader in Argentina. That's why he continues to attack Canada. That's why he put the MAGA ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, and yes, we're going to continue focusing on Pete Hoekstra because this guy is a menace. This guy is a provocateur. And I will point out that the recent interview I did with Ben Mysilis on our sister network, Meidas Touch, had over 1.2 million views. That's unprecedented because people understand that Trump's minions, his ambassadors, his foreign policy is about undermining democratic nations like Canada while he's pumping money into far-right countries like the Argentinian government right now. So let's remember this, folks. It's a playbook. There's a lot of chaos going on there, but the playbook is clear. And the playbook coming out of Washington, coming out of the far right, is to push extremism. It's to undermine democracy. And it's to shore up governments that have no business staying in power. I mean, a guy that loses $4.4 billion in a crypto scheme is clearly not fit for government. But hey, seems like the perfect guy, perfect friend for a guy like Donald Trump. So this is the latest from Meidas Canada. Keep the messages coming. Keep the conversation happening. We want to keep kicking at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. So from Charlie Angus here at Meidas Canada, thank you. Merci. Miigwech. Hey, fellow resistors, I really hope you're enjoying the work that we're doing of trying to tell the stories of resistance, of building a global network against the fascist right-wing threat, and celebrating the incredible stories of our land here in Canada, because Canada is the front line in the fight for democratic values. So wherever you are in the world, we appreciate your support. But I need to ask you to help us. We're a super small team here. There's so many ideas coming at us, but we're trying our best to get out there, to be on the road, to be doing the work, to be doing the research. So I need you to hit subscribe. Support Meidas Canada. Subscribe. How do you subscribe? Well, on the YouTube page, just press the button subscribe. That makes a big difference. We have the Charlie Angus Resistance Network on Substack. Please subscribe there. You can do it for free, or if you want to make a contribution, we'd appreciate it. And if you want to help us get out there, to get on the road, to be able to tell the stories from the different parts of our vast country, we need your support there too. You can make a contribution at info@charlieangus.ca. And hey, if you don't want to make a contribution, that's fine too, because times are tough, and we know that, and we appreciate everything we get. Just send your messages. That helps us. But please subscribe. We need you to be part of this team.